This media is brought to you by Polyscope.
In the realm of tomorrow, where techniques mind, we ponder, we dream.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to finally meet you because this is how we meet each other nowadays, over Zoom. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, so my name's Steven. I'm the CEO of Mode Maison. We started several years ago. And I come from I guess, a non-traditional background in this space, meaning that I actually came from the luxury fashion space before starting Mode Maison. So very, very different, now because we're doing AI. It's a pretty different route. And so I guess my main passions are storytelling. And in the case of Mode Maison, our company, which I'll talk about in a second, unlocking creativity. So I know kind of in the creative space, in the creative world, AI is kind of a doom and gloom topic, but I do think that it can be leveraged and utilized in a pretty exciting way. So the thing I always talk about is if I'm a retailer and I wanted to put Jacques Cousteau on a chair on Mars, I don't know why you would want to, but with AI you could.
That sounds like a
so
prompt.
yeah, exactly. So that's where I think that it really does unlock creativity and unlock possibilities for retailers and creatives. And that's basically what Maison does. So we are a research lab that's focused on building multimodal foundation models specifically for the use within retail. And whereas you have tools like Midjourney and others that create really beautiful imagery, what those tools lack is being able to put real world physically based product into generative worlds. And it's a really challenging task because AI effectively is set up to put in some sort of input and then create an output that is different than the input, which is inherently kind of like different than what a retailer would want, for instance, because you want your actual product. You don't want any hallucinations on the product that you're putting in. And so that's kind of the confines, or I guess the context of what we do, is creating multimodal foundation models for retailers to actually be able to leverage or put in their product and create beautiful worlds that encompass their product.
Yeah, that's sorely needed because I was trying to create a meme the other day with a giant can of Diet Coke beside the White House, and it could not get that giant Diet Coke
Yeah,
correct.
yeah, it's gonna struggle for
It had
sure.
a huge problem with it.
Exactly, and it actually within that context, if you tried long enough, you probably could, because there's a lot of Diet Coke cans out there that it's been trained off of.
Oh
But
yeah,
if you have a
exactly.
specific Louis Vuitton purse, for instance, that there's not an infinite amount of images on, that's where it becomes challenging. But it is still even challenging with something as photographed as a can of Diet Coke. So it's a big problem.
Oh yeah, I mean, it constantly misspells. I mean, do you know why AI misspells? Does it do it on purpose,
No,
or
it
is
doesn't.
it?
Now there's some different tools that are actually having a um, much better. It can do it a lot better. So like with Flux, for instance, and Runway Frame. So Runway AI traditionally been a video generator, but now they just came out with something called Frames. It does a really good job of spelling. But yes, historically, hands, 5 fingers on a hand has been pretty difficult, and text. Don't ask
Yeah,
me. Well, we could get into why, but it's kind of boring. But yeah, those are challenges.
it's nuts. But it is getting a lot better because I know my son was doing a banner for his software company, and he put in the name of the company and he put in a few colors and it created a perfect banner and it was perfectly spelled. And I thought, wow, you are lucky first
Yeah,
time in.
yeah,
That'll
no,
never happen again.
it has been difficult before. Yeah, for sure.
So, are you one of the founders of the company?
Yes, yes. So, like I kind of was getting at earlier, my background's in luxury fashion. So I was actually, prior to starting my Maison, um, was pulled out of school a little bit early. And became the youngest ever fashion or concept designer for Ralph Lauren Purple Label.
Nice.
So it was really, really fun. Got a really great experience there. And then kind of moved over to the dark side and started my Maison with my co-founder Jakob, and started my Maison to kind of you know unlock storytelling even further. And so really we started in the kind of the CGI space, so the computer generated imagery space, a very traditional space, but built out a lot of technologies and kind of the core infrastructure to create one-to-one hyper accurate physically based digital twins at scale for brands,
Mm.
kind of the infrastructure that supported that. And then from there, it gave us a really incredible base to kind of like expand beyond that and be able to leverage these digital twins that are all physically based and create, these generative foundation models to be able to leverage those digital twins.
So you started pre-generative AI then?
Yes, but that's always been on the roadmap. So that's always been something that we know in order to scale, we've had to have that on the roadmap. So I always like to say, like, before it was cool, we were doing it. So it is it's something that we're super excited for. We've been kind of like very bullish on for many years, and we're really excited that the world is kind of taken to generative AI.
So how do you create these just high resolution digital 3D imagery of the product itself? Is that how
Yeah,
you create
so
these twins?
Yeah, so we kind of think of it in three key or core parts of the overall pipeline. So you have 3D geometry creation. So it's basically like building a clay model inside of a computer of the product.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the first piece. You have digital material creation, which kind of runs in tandem. But basically, you have your model, and then you have a material that kind of gets overlapped on top of that model. And that's where we've created a proprietary technology called the TMAC, so the Total Material Appearance Capture System. And what that effectively allows any brand to do is put in a material into this 1 meter by 1 meter capture area. It's the biggest one in the world, and press the big green button, as I like to call it. And within a minute, you have a beautiful digital material that you can put into any rendering engine. And then so you have that. And the third piece is the kind of the virtual production. So taking both the 3D model, the digital material, and then actually creating beautiful imagery or videos with a physically based product. Now, what the TMAC allows to do is we place these on factory floors, so on-prem with factories, big fashion brands or just big brands in general, and studios. And that's kind of like we kind of like equate that to, putting sensors out in the real world. So we actually collect all that data. It's fairly, you can kind of think about it similar to like Tesla. So Teslas have all these embedded sensors in their cars. They capture a lot of the data from street data,
Right.
and then use that to train their models synthetically. We do the same thing for materials, and that enables us to get brands to digitize their products very quickly, and then to utilize those one-to-one, actually physically based products that have been digitized into these generative environments. And that's where that kind of that third piece, the virtual production, which has typically been one of the harder things to do, just because of the skill required and the time it takes to create a virtual world. That basically cuts that down to an infinite amount of virtual worlds you can create within a matter of seconds, because all that it requires a brand to do is take your 3D model, your digital material from the TMAC, drag and drop that into the what we call a la mode browser, and then you text prompt it. So you say, create XYZ chair, for instance, that you just uploaded with XYZ material in a beautiful Lake Como Palazzo, with the lighting coming from this angle and with a beautiful Gucci model sitting on top of the chair.
Nice. Who needs a
And then voila,
photographer when you
within a
have
couple,
that?
yeah, exactly. No, seriously though. So within a couple seconds, it generates, a really beautiful image as you described in the best case. So
Fantastic. And where is this imagery being used right now?
So right now it's primarily being utilized by brands, retailers, manufacturers, and just kind of commerce generally. Yeah, it just helps out with their production a lot. As you can see, or I guess probably assume, again, my whole deal is like unlocking creativity, but the flip side of that is that it does greatly reduce cost, because if you don't really need to have physical products or physical product shoots, that cuts down your overall production costs down substantially. So like in any fashion house, a luxury global fashion house, for instance, you might have a shoot, you might come away with seven images, like seven just straight up just shots. And
Right.
that 7 images might have cost you $7.5 million.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
Because of all of them, everything that goes in behind that, it's insane compared to your costs must be minuscule compared to the old style photography.
it's just compute. So that's the only cost. And you can obviously prompt it an infinite amount of times. And so that $7.5 million gets, broken down into a couple cents.
Beautiful. And they're happy with it. They're happy
Yeah,
with
no,
the
absolutely.
results.
So we're probably our own worst enemy in the sense that we're very particular about how things look. So first, the barometer is it has to be absolutely physically accurate. So like that's the non-question. And I think that's what initially set Momazon, kind of Momazon Labs, apart from the competition. And then the second big hurdle is we have to create images better or video better than you can in the real world.
Right.
At least that's kind of
Well, yeah,
from
that's
our
why
perspective.
use technology unless you can improve upon the real world, right? Otherwise, you
Exactly. And
just
so
do it yourself.
we're a hyper fanatic about that. Again, we kind of get in our own way sometimes because we put such stringent policies on ourselves. But you could make the argument that's why we've been, I guess, successful today too. So I don't know. It's this thing that I'm always trying to wrestle with.
But it is,
Scale
I
and
mean,
quality.
it's a lot, it's a lot cheaper than real photography, but at the same time, you do need to have that quality level because otherwise your risk turning into kind of the slop that comes out at the lower levels right now.
Well, yeah, and also just like literal risk in the sense that and liabilities around, you know, if you're selling, millions of products online or hundreds of thousands of products, and people are buying based on what they're seeing, which is obviously the case, and then that product is not actually what's showing up the front door, well, then you run the risk of, just lawsuits and huge liabilities. And so that's where we work with some of the biggest retailers and companies in the world, and that's their biggest thing because they, if they're doing a production run of 100,000 products or 100,000 SKUs that they have sitting in a warehouse in New Jersey, and then they're actually not shooting that actual product, they're doing it via digital twins with Amazon. And if that product doesn't look exactly like what the customers are going to receive, well, then we have a big issue on our hands. So
Yeah.
that's something that we're up against as well.
Well, and is this, it sounds like you were talking about doing luxury products, but does this also come down to, I mean, there's a big difference between looking at a jug of milk on Walmart.com and looking at a Louis Vuitton bag or something like that, right?
Yeah, so we really started around this idea of creating this beautiful marketplace for the luxury home goods industry. But what we started seeing is, if you can digitize a sofa, you can really digitize anything. And so it's
Right.
kind of, it's spiraled to encompassing any product. So we work with anybody from, obviously luxury home, but to luxury fashion, to also aerospace, to automotive manufacturers, to, again, it really can be anything. And again, it started from a, hey, let's unlock creativity perspective, but because the implications are such where you're just eliminating a huge amount of costs, in some cases, 80+% of the overall cost for a brand. It's really gotten, down market companies who we initially weren't really focused on. Very excited as well.
Well, I mean, these are things that were out of reach for them before, right?
Entirely, yeah.
They wouldn't be able to do it. They wouldn't have the budgets to do that sort of thing, right? And now they can. Now they can do something as good as.
Exactly. And again, I guess we'll get to this in the next, I guess, segment, so to speak. But it really does unlock this idea that I've been pushing for years called generative commerce. So you can look at it as maybe it's scary, maybe it's not. I don't know. I think there probably should be regulation around it, quite honestly. And it's not probably in my best interest to say this, but what this unlocks or enables for brands or manufacturers or retailers is what we call embed mode. So effectively, imagine this. You know how like YouTube has, they have their own platform online, obviously, but then they, if you're seeing a video on a website, it's more often than not being served up by YouTube's embedded player.
Right.
So you can kind of think about that similar to a la mode. So a la mode, you go into a platform, you be able to work with it. But then we have this thing called embed mode, which you can actually embed the a la mode player into anywhere on a website where you have a video or an image container. And effectively what that does is it generates, these virtual worlds, or merchandised images for each and every consumer based on user profiles or kind of like what it knows about you. And so where we saw kind of these social media companies going with they were hiring people from the gaming industry to kind of like get primarily the younger generation addicted to social media.
Right.
It's hard not to think that same thinking might not apply to if we can addict people to images or addict people to product based on what we know about them and drive transaction rates absolutely through the roof, it's hard to not think that somebody's not going to go crazy with that capability if they have that capability. So I do think there are some ethical dilemmas, like questions that are raised about that. But yeah, I don't know where I got off on this tangent, but it is something that's kind of on my mind constantly, and I'm always thinking about because, once you open that Pandora's box, then it's hard to put back in.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can create these environments on the fly, basically. All you need is compute behind them. So do you actually power the engine that would provide something like that, or is that something that you'd hand off to your customers?
No, so you mean power? What do you mean by power, actually? Is
Like
it compute, I guess?
you said there's a player, and then you'd be running the player. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's all cloud based, and so it'll be using NVIDIA compute basically in the cloud.
Right. So that and that's all done at the back end. That so I would say if I were to want to run this and say I'm presenting this product, but I want the rest of the information to completely come out of the preferences of the person who is viewing it. So you'd be able to collect all that together, or is that something that's for the
Yeah,
future?
so it's like it utilizes like Google Analytics and Google Shopping data. So if it knows that the past 7 to 10 purchases you made, there's been something read in an image. So all of the images basically on the site or all the videos are going to be generated with a bunch of red stuff
Right.
in the image with the product. So again, that's not a very uh, probably that's not the best example to give, but it probably highlights
Yeah, so
kind of how far you
the
can take it.
viewer is looking at it and going, "Why do I really like all these images that are coming out of here?"
Exactly.
They have no idea why.
Exactly. And so also if it knows kind of like your past purchases, or in the case of like fashion, like your sizing and just kind of again what you like, then the generator effectively can start pulling kind of like your previous purchases. So if you're buying a sofa and it knows that you bought these two side tables and this lamp, well then it'll be generating, these environments that are kind of like specifically for you
Yeah.
and only you in real time.
So even eerier than the one where I just talked about that and now it's showing up in my search results. And you,
Yeah, so I actually like this. It's been a constant topic of discussion with me and my friends. It's like, you keep hearing things from like Zuckerberg, like, in front of the Senate saying, hey, we don't do that. But then it's really hard to think they're not doing it because it happens like every day almost. So
exactly.
yeah, I don't, I'm still
I'm
not sure
100%
what I
sure I
think about
did
that.
not type that into a search engine, but yet
Exactly.
there it is.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, so how long have you been around as a company?
A little over 6 years now.
Nice. And what was was there like a moment when you realized the path you were on was the right one? Like, did you have land a big client or what was it? I mean, what was it? Tell me about that moment.
Yeah, so I think that so from our perspective, we're not just I think like some of our peers in the space, they build tech for tech's sake. So our team is composed of um, you know uh, some really incredible PhDs from some of the top universities, material scientists, physicists, and then little old me as a creative. So our team really is driven by something very different than traditional tech companies in the
Hmm.
sense that everything is built around this core concept or idea of unlocking creativity and unlocking possibilities for retailers. Again, like the Jacques Cousteau kind of on a chair on Mars, for example, versus the other approach is, hey, let's just build tech for tech's sake or science for science sake, and then let's try to figure out how to plug this in and monetize so we can keep doing the things we love to do. What we love to do is like unlock creativity, and then how we do that is it's been primarily based in science. So that is kind of a core thing that's always been built in. And to your question around like that, if there was some sort of like seminal moment or key moment that kind of like illustrated that we were on the right path, I think there's been a few. Again, we mainly started as a marketplace or a platform for luxury home. That was fairly difficult to kind of get off the ground just because it required buy-in from basically a customer base, which is these large luxury home goods brands that didn't want to go
Right.
online. So you had to kind of convince them, and then also convince them to give you all of their products to be able to digitize, or just like put these T
Oh
Max
man, that's
lids.
sales.
Yeah.
I can imagine that sales job to get them to do
Oh,
that.
it's really
You
really
had to
difficult.
drag them kicking and screaming, I'm sure.
No, for years, literally. So I would go actually to like Milan. I would go and knock on their doorsteps because they wouldn't reply to my emails, and they kept telling me to go away, go away, go away. And then after like the fourth or fifth day of me just showing up on their doorstep again, they're like, "All right, 5 minutes, just sit down with us. We'll give you 5 minutes, and then you'll go away. Promise." And I was like, "I promise." But 5 minutes turned to 15 minutes, turned to 30 minutes, turned into
Nice.
meeting the family. So that ended up kicking off. But then we started building and kind of growing that. And the capabilities around digitizing their products. And then that kind of spiraled into well beyond just furniture, into the fashion space, into the again, automotive space, aerospace, and then that kind of just opened the doors to this infrastructure being built around digitizing products in an accurate manner and that are physically based, and then the generative component that we've been super focused on since day one.
Do you ever see yourselves opening it up as an API for others? Because I'm sure that there's other people who'd love to be able to tap into your, hey, I need a super accurate image of a can of Diet Coke. I mean, would you be
100%.
able to,
Yeah.
would you be open to allowing
Yeah.
that
So
to
a lot of
happen?
the foundation model that we're developing called a la mode is going to be open in a sense. So
Mm,
you can absolutely plug in. The goal there is to be the kind of the underlying foundation model for brands, retailers, manufacturers, whoever it may be, to be able to leverage. And it's agnostic of, where they're getting the 3D models from or where they're even getting their digital materials from. And it's one where you can actually train your model on top of. So if I'm Ralph Lauren and I have 51 years of imagery because we've been around 51 years, then I can actually train basically a LoRa or mini model, and then put that on top of the a la mode kind of that foundation model base. And then everything that's being generated at Ralph Lauren will kind of like more or less fit the style of what you'd assume or
mm.
expect from Ralph Lauren. So it is pretty modular and composable for really anybody to be able to use.
But then the objects that you create in your database, are they available for others to use elsewhere in their
The 3D
models?
objects, well, just
Yeah,
because well, so we're really not a services company,
right.
and we don't we do it for a very select few clients, because to be quite honest, we're not really good at services.
Mm,
We're just not focused on it. Now, actually, I say that, but I'm not very good at services. Our services component is very, very, very good. I'm not very good. So we're just really laser focused on creating the tools and technology for brands to be able to leverage. And then also there's the added uh, complexity of, if you're a brand and you say, I want Mode Maison to create my digital twins in-house in Mode Maison's house, then we can't obviously give that out to other people because that's their proprietary 3D model, for instance.
No, but
Um,
at some point, if they said, we can rent these out for use, I mean, but then they'd have to concern themselves as to how it's going to be used. Because kind of like if you think of it like a photography database, right? So these are 3D models that are available for use internally. You've created these ultra realistic 3D models, and they're only being used within your platform. I'm assuming it's possible at some point your clients might say, "Oh, we want these to be more broadly used."
100%. And actually, within the textile space, for instance, that is very much at play because there's always been a question of who takes on the cost of digitizing these materials. Is it the textile mill? Is it the brands actually that are utilizing those fabrics on their furniture, for instance, in the furniture case? Or who is it? So we've seen that both it's valuable for everybody across the chain, but
Mm,
what these textile mills are kind of like becoming, I guess, smart to is that if they'll digitize the textiles at their cost, then they'll actually allow anybody to use it for free,
hmm.
such as a furniture manufacturer. That the furniture manufacturer will have these digitized assets they could, for free, be able to put it in their furniture, show their client. Their client falls in love with the product, and then, oh, by the way, you have to buy it from the mill. So
Right.
whereas initially they were like, hold on, first of all, we shouldn't be digitizing these or having to pay for the cost of the digitization of the materials. Where it was like, where the question used to be around, hey, should we be it or should the furniture manufacturer? Then the second question was, hey, we absolutely shouldn't be giving these away for free because we just paid for all of it. Now it's turned into one where they're seeing all the value because if a consumer can see their product on a chair, I mean, they have to go and purchase the fabric from these mills. So
Yeah.
it's been cool to see. There's been
If you
a
think about it,
change in kind of mindset.
it's kind of like product placement, right? I've placed my product in this setting, and when
100%.
when the customer falls in love with it, then you have to go back to, where did I get this? Where did this product come from?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, well, it's time to think like a futurist. It's the year 2035. You already touched on some of the things you're thinking about for the future, but where do you think you're going to be in 10 years? How advanced will the technology be by then?
Yeah. So just imagine like embed mode. So like building beautiful, um, completely generative worlds or experiences with product integrated, but take that a step further. So as we or others, create huge data sets that encompass physically based data or physics-based data of products. Creating experiences is going to shift to actually creating the product itself. So imagine a world where all products are created generatively entirely for you and only you based on user preference. So let's just take the easier example of a sofa again. If I know that you like more architectural kind of shapes and not such curved shapes, well then, if you have an engine that can effectively create anything based in real world physics, well then it can create a product again for you and only you based on your user preference or data. And so it'll create a beautiful, architecturally structured sofa with all this information that it knows about you. And that starts to kind of shift the model of just production, the entire product lifecycle management, kind of on its head. So whereas right now you have brands or manufacturers that have to do these huge production runs, shipping product across the world and hold, maybe 100,000 SKUs, and then just, pray and hope that somebody, they sell at least 70% of those SKUs.
Right.
You can effectively just generate these assets for each person and every person individually. Then if they purchase that asset, ship that asset, or, send that asset down the road to basically a 3D print shop or whatever you want to call it. They take that asset, they make the product for you, they ship it down the road to you, and you just eliminated a whole amount of costs. You've eliminated basically the death of all retail, which is all stock and all stock units.
Yeah.
And then,
well, the disruption of all retail for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And so it's pretty far off to think that we're close to that, but with every passing year and with every passing month, actually, that becomes a little bit more possible, and it just really unlocks so many capabilities that it's better, faster, stronger, cheaper. Like you just go down the list.
No, I love that concept, and I think we're going there. But won't the brands push back against that because they want to have they want their influence in there too? I mean, they don't want to sell you a couch that's like Chris's perfect couch. They want to sell Ralph Lauren's Chris's perfect couch, right? So they have to have some influence in there as well, don't they?
Yeah, so two things on that. So I think in the midterm, you'll have brands that kind of like set their parameters around what their aesthetic kind of vibe is. So if you're Ralph, then you can kind of set the parameters, so to speak. You can train a model on top of the foundation model that generates products that again would kind of more or less live in that world, so to speak. But at some point, and again, this is where the ethical dilemmas kind of come in. I'm going to preface with I'm the biggest brand guy. I love brands. I love college to go join and work for a brand and kind of like help there. So I want that to be definitely stated. However, it's really hard to think that brands at some level will be able to compete with, some sort of AI system or model that can effectively pull different triggers and create products that speak to like the deepest desires and wants and needs that a person of a person. Because brands, again, they're trying to create what is the best or most optimal average product for the biggest amount of consumers.
Right.
And even if it's a super beautiful luxury heritage brand like Louis Vuitton or Ralph or whoever it may be, and people always make the case of like, hey, there's something to be said for heritage. That you can't compete with a brand that's been around for 100 years. I would push back and say, you think that, but if an AI essentially can say, I know what triggers them more than just that 100-year-old heritage, I would push back and say that I think it actually could. So it's a scary future. I also think it's an exciting future because from a consumer perspective, if I could have better products that kind of like fit more with the world that I want, I would always say that's better. And also it's a better world just in terms of consumption and the sustainable component as well. So yeah, there's pros and cons with everything. I think the pros outweigh the cons here, but again, I'm very biased.
But you know what could end up happening is that the customers themselves might end up becoming brands on their own, right?
100%.
Because let's say you create this virtual environment and maybe you expose these virtual environments to the world so that someone can go, oh, Chris's couch is kind of cool. I want Chris's couch, or I want Chris's couch with variations. So you could conceivably, kind of like YouTube, make it a platform to sort of expose your preferences to the rest of the world, and maybe they'll glom onto that. So you have these micro brands just coming out of nowhere that is just created on the fly based on what individuals want.
I completely agree, and I think everything is going in that direction around like the Mr. Beastification, if that's a word. Where people are becoming brands. And I think that'll just happen at an exponential rate as we keep moving forward.
Yeah, and I think we don't have to worry. I don't think the brands have to worry too much because there's still people who want to be. They want to be the Goyard. They want to wear the Goyard. They want to have the Goyard wallet or whatever. They want to have the branded thing because they just want to be part of that brand. And then there's going to be hybrid situations. So I think we're going to get to a world where everything is available. The super customized, exactly what you want, which with no brand influence, something in between, and something all the way on the brand side. So I think the world is just going to expand in possibilities, and nobody will be left out in the cold.
No, I agree. And again, I think we're a little ways off. I don't think we're a little ways off in terms of like the hyper personalized experience. And I say that because I've seen it,
Yeah.
and we're definitely not very far off. We're about to be launching that piece. So, but I do think we are definitely obviously ways off from the actual generative product capability, because it's not just the capability of generating any product at any time for anybody in real time. You have to kind of change the entire production model, which is not going to happen overnight, obviously.
The complete system has to be upended from, and
Yeah,
I don't even know if 3D printers can support that yet. I mean, there's so much already out there keeping it the way it is. So, but
yeah,
I want to see these things happening. I want to see these things.
So like, one of the other things on that is like you can I like to look at what they're doing with Ghost Kitchen. So Travis Kalanick, the founder of Uber, he kind of moved over and was creating these ghost kitchens around different cities. So you have one kitchen, and the model is where like that one kitchen can make Chinese food, Mexican food, all these different types of cuisines.
Yeah, we've got those around here. They're great.
Exactly. So like I do think that's kind of how I see production going down the road. So you have like one kind of shop, these localized, manufacturers, in every city or in multiple cities, that can make kind of any type of product, like any type of shirt, for instance.
Yeah.
And so I do think that's possible. And I think the incentives are there for a lot of different kind of stakeholders across the chain. But just realistically, I think it takes obviously a little bit longer than creating, hyper personalized experiences.
Yeah. Everything takes longer than you think.
Yeah.
Anyways, this has been great. Very fascinating. So if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Probably just via LinkedIn. I have like 3 followers on LinkedIn. I'm not very good at LinkedIn, but Stephen Gay on LinkedIn. Yeah, just I guess info@momosonhome.com or momosonlabs.com. Any of the
Sounds
emails.
good. I'll put all the links in the show notes, and people can go direct. So thank you so much. This has been
Awesome.
great.
Thanks so much. Great chatting.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Pixels and philosophies merge and mold, a future untold, unseen.